I'm Nicole Vogelsinger of Wildboho. Let's start off with a little recap about the embroidery challenge that I'm working on. Well, it has been a year since my book has come out, and I wanted to do a little something special. So I have a lot of embroidery samplers that are in here, and each sampler focuses on one stitch. My plan is to go through this stitch by stitch with each of the samplers that I created, and I am going to work on a new sampler. These are all the samplers that I created. Each one is a separate stitch, but for this project I am going to be going through my book and working stitch by stitch to create a new sampler on one piece of fabric. So I am going to start off with the back stitch today. The fabric that I'm using is one by Martha Negley. I have it hooped up, and I have started a little bit of my back stitch. So I'm using, this is the DMC soft cotton. Some Michaels have it, some don't have it. And if you really can't find it, you can get it on the DMC website. I'll buy it when I see it in person because I like to pick out my colors in person, but if I'm really stuck, I'll just get it online. So I've started by outlining my one leaf, my first leaf. I left a tiny bit of space in between the leaf and the fabric because I feel like you see your stitches more when a little bit of space is emphasized there. And I'm not going around the whole leaf. I'm just going to do this in little areas. I'll probably grab one of my other colors. That one doesn't feel right. Maybe this color, and I will do a little right here. I'm cutting a length of thread. I usually keep it around 12 inches, and this thread is not divisible. So even though it looks like the DMC floss that you can divide out into 6 strands, this one you are just going to cut from the skein and use it exactly as is. So it's meant to have a thicker look, which is why I love it so much in my embroidery. I'm using a milliner's needle with this thread, and I'm just going to start at the top and work a little bit down this way. Again, I'm just emphasizing my stitches here, leaving a small gap in between the leaf and the area that I'm actually outlining. And I'm just following the lines of the leaf kind of loosely. I'm not drawing a line. I'm just letting the stitches go how they go while keeping them the same stitch length and following the shape. This is a lighter background here, and so I'm just going to be careful of any time I want to carry my stitches. I wouldn't carry my stitches from this point over to here because, and I'll see if it'll show up on the fabric. I'm not sure if you can see that. I can see that my thread is carried from here over to here, and so I'm not going to do that with the lighter backgrounds. If this were a dark background, I wouldn't have to worry about that as much. So for this, I'm just going to wind my needle through a few of these stitches, and then I'm going to cut it off. And if I want to continue with this color, I'll just start new somewhere else. I actually might do this up here as well. My goal when working on a piece like this is to have the eye, or your eye or my eye, flow from top to bottom, or however you want your eyes to flow over the piece. So I've got some back stitch here, I've got some back stitch here. As I'm making decisions about what stitch to add where, I'm kind of thinking what makes sense with the flow of the piece. And so I am going to carry this stitch just up here. We're not going overboard with the stitches. This is a great opportunity to just get some practice in if you're a beginner with stitches like this, because you don't need to transfer a pattern. The fabric is your pattern, which is why I love embroidering on fabric like this. When I first began wild boho and embroidering like this. Most of my projects that I did were applique pieces, so they would be 2 or 3 fabrics fused together in an embroidery hoop. I loved to mix and match fabrics, and one of my favorite stitches at the time, and it still is the back stitch, or was the back stitch. I love how versatile the stitch is and how simple it is, but how cool it can look on a fabric. So you can see it's really adding some nice details to the fabric. So I moved on to lots of other stitches, but this is a great one to have in your embroidery toolbox. A great stitch to just be able to pull out and add to a project. And next I'm going to show you how to work the back stitch with sequins. And again, I'm just going to end my threads the same way. I'm not tying a knot on these. I won't tie a knot until we get to the point where we're adding sequins or beads to our project. For my next back stitch, I am going to be using this thread. This is by Wonderfill Specialty Threads. It's one of my all-time favorite beading and sequining threads. It is a 12 weight cotton, and you can see it's really pretty and variegated. This is the fruity, and then if you are looking for a more solid color, that's called the spaghetti, and they have that in all sorts of colors. But I love the variegated for working with fabrics like this. I'm also going to be using these sequins. These are from Recollections. These are from Michaels, and you can find them in the scrapbooking section of the store. I love these. They're tiny flat sequins, and I love the variety of neutrals that I have to work with in just one container. So I'm going to pour out some of these. When choosing a needle, you just want to make sure that you have a needle that is fine enough that it can pass through your sequins, and you want to do that whenever you're adding beads or sequins to a project. And I'm just going to cut a length of thread and thread my needle. So I'm going to be doing the same sort of thing. So on these leaves, I outlined around the outside of the leaf. On this one, I'm going to outline a little bit of the inside of the leaf, and I'm going to use these sequins and the back stitch. So I'm just going to bring my needle up. I'm just choosing a place to start. I bring my needle up, I add a sequin, and then I make my first back stitch the same exact way that I was making my back stitch when I didn't have a sequin on my needle. And now I'm going to make my next stitch. Now this time I have a choice I can make. I can either bring my needle down and go into this sequin. I could go into that back stitch, or I can just choose to keep my stitches a little separate, which is one of my favorite ways to do the back stitch. I like to have a tiny gap in between my stitches because I like to see the individual stitches like that. And so even though you can't quite see the gap with this thread and the sequins, I know it's there. And I'm still working it exactly the same way, just adding a sequin each time. I'm just making sure to keep my sequin on the inside of the leaf because I don't want it going over and extending onto that color fabric. And I'm just going to add little details here and there with the sequins. And then whenever I'm stitching on beads or sequins, rather than just winding the threads through the back, I always tie a knot just to give myself the feeling of security, and I don't have to worry that I'm going to lose my beads and sequins. So here's what it looks like so far. I love that the sequins give this just a subtle sort of shimmer, and I'm going to hold off on adding them to this point. At any point in this project, you can go back to one of your favorite stitches. If you are stitching along with me, I hope that you try and add a little bit of bling to your piece, a little bit of shine in the form of sequins or beads. Next time, we are moving on to another stitch. But if you follow me on Instagram, at the end of this challenge, I'm going to be announcing a giveaway for my newest book, Needles Out. So join me over there. Happy stitching! And just a quick recap for the supplies I'm using for this project. This is fabric by Martha Negley. This is the Autumn Medley. This one is out of print, but you can still find it on Etsy if you really love this fabric like I do, and you want to try and find some for yourself. I have a 7-inch embroidery hoop for my piece. The threads that I used today are the DMC soft cotton. On the DMC website, it is sometimes listed as Cotton Redder's Matte. It is a matte tapestry wool or a tapestry thread. And you can see it's not quite as thick as a tapestry wool, but the effect on fabric is that it gives a really nice line, and the stitches are very visible, which is why I love this thread so much. I'm also using the Wonderful Specialty Threads Fruity. This is the 12-weight cotton, and I'm using this for beading and any sequins that you see me use in this project. I have a bead tray. I have my Recollections sequins. You can tell I really loved these colors. Again, you can find these in the scrapbooking section at Michael's, and they are flat sequins. Needles, I always suggest just to choose needles that you like to work with. I like milliner's needles when I am using my DMC threads, and when I'm using smaller sequins, I just need to make sure that my needle will pass through the eye of the sequin. Have fun gathering your supplies, finding your fabric, and I hope you join me for this challenge.